Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. In 2020, the Atlanta Falcons were a really bad team. Things started off terribly for them, as they started the season off with an 0-5 record, thanks in part to a loss against the Bears where they blew a huge lead and Atlanta themselves, and a loss against the Cowboys where they somehow found a way to out-Atlanta themselves yet again. Because of this awful start, head coach Dan Quinn got fired, and was replaced with defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, who became the interim head coach for the season. That's how most of these mid-season firings go. A coach gets fired, and the one that replaces him is promoted from within, just to finish out the year. But imagine if the Falcons, after firing Quinn, called up Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, asked him if he wanted to become the interim coach of the Falcons. Bieniemy took the job, and then returned to Kansas City as the offensive coordinator immediately after the season ended, like nothing ever happened. That's not how these things work. If you're a soccer fan, you're familiar with the idea of loaning players. But loaning coaches? Well, that seems absurd. I bring this up because this crazy scenario actually happened. In 1972, Phil Bengtson went from the Chargers to the Patriots, to the Chargers again, to unemployed, all in the span of about a month. The whole thing makes no sense, but we're going to break it down anyway because why not? This is the story of the craziest interim coach hire in the history of the NFL. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context as to how we got to this point. After this, we have to go all the way back to 1968. After the Green Bay Packers won their second Super Bowl in franchise history, Vince Lombardi, following an illustrious career, stepped down as the head coach of the team. What he left behind was one of the greatest coaching resumes of all time. He won 5 NFL championships in 9 seasons, and finished with a winning record all 9 years, taking a team that was one of the laughingstocks in football throughout the 1950s, and turning them into arguably the greatest dynasty in the history of the sport. Who was going to replace him? The man faced with this tall order was Phil Bengtson, the main character in our story. If you're going to replace Lombardi, replacing him with Bengtson seemed like a smart move. He was the defensive coordinator of the Packers all 9 years that Lombardi was there, and over his final 8 seasons, Green Bay's defense ranked inside the top 3 of the entire NFL in points allowed. Bengtson was practically being groomed to be Lombardi's successor. And how would Bengtson fill these incredibly big shoes? How would he fare as the next head coach of the Packers? Not well. Not well at all. In his 3 seasons as Green Bay's head coach, the team went 20-21-1, which was a far cry from the glory days of the Packers under Lombardi. He feuded with legendary cornerback Herb Adderley, as after the 1969 season, Adderley hated Bengtson so much that he retired to force his way out of the city. You can learn more about that incident by clicking the card in the upper right corner. After the 1970 season, with no playoff appearances and a disappointing stint overall, Bengtson was fired, and was replaced by Missouri coach Dan Devine. It seemed like Bengtson blew his only shot at being a head coach by taking one of the best dynasties in football and turning them into a mediocre mess. But little did he know that not even 2 years later, he would get his shot at coaching again in just about the weirdest way possible. I don't want to say expectations were high for the New England Patriots entering the 1972 season, because no one in the world had them winning the AFC East over the reigning AFC champion Miami Dolphins. However, there were some pretty good reasons to be optimistic. In 1971, the Patriots went 6-8, and finished the season winning their final 4 home games. The newly built Schaefer Stadium was a surprisingly tough place for opponents to play. Quarterback Jim Plunkett had a really good rookie season, as he finished the year 2nd in the entire NFL in touchdown passes. When the only quarterback ahead of you in all of football in this category is John Hadle, and you're a rookie, you're doing something right. If Plunkett makes another leap in his 2nd year, then they've got a shot to, at the very least, compete for a wild card. Oh man, did that not happen at all. The Patriots started the 1972 season with a 2-1 record, and then everything completely collapsed. The worst part was that during the 6-game losing streak that they went on to drop to an abysmal 2-7 after 9 games, only one of these games was even close. The Patriots got outscored 222-57 in this stretch. If we break down those numbers, they were allowing an average of 37 points per game, while scoring an average of 9. When you're losing each game by an average of 28 points, that's laughably bad. And without a doubt, the lowest point of this stretch was on November 12, 1972, when the Patriots traveled down south to the Orange Bowl to take on the undefeated Miami Dolphins. It was going to take an act of God for the Patriots to beat this Miami team. And unfortunately for Pats fans, on this day, God was looking the other way. The Dolphins curb stomped the Patriots by a final score of 52-0. New England had 11 first downs compared to 21 for Miami. New England had 92 rushing yards compared to 181 for Miami. New England had 117 passing yards compared to 307 for Miami. New England had 169 yards of total offense compared to 482 for Miami, meaning that Miami had triple the yardage that New England did on this day. And Jim Plunkett, who was not even close to being able to replicate his success from his 1971 rookie season, finished the game 7 for 19 with 2 picks, 4 sacks, and an abysmal passer rating of 7.7, which is worse than if you did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. This game was the straw that broke the camel's back. When you lose 52-0, which was 8 possessions back then, you have to make changes. After the game, John Mazur resigned as the head coach of the team. He said that he couldn't do it anymore, and that the team was divided because of the things that are going on. What those things were, he never said, saying, "What's the sense? It's over now, I'm gone." He said a whole lot of nothing on his way out, but regardless, the Patriots now needed a head coach. They needed someone who could just finish the season for the final 5 games, take him to the finish line. And instead of promoting from within, like most teams, and quite frankly any sensible team would do in this situation, they decided to do something bold. They hired a guy from another team. After the 1970 season, Phil Bengtson became the defensive coordinator of the San Diego Chargers. Considering the fact that Bengtson was one of the best defensive coordinators of the 1960s, the move was really well received, as head coach Sid Gilman said how fortunate the team was to be able to obtain his services, saying that he had nothing but respect for how Bengtson ran a defense. And while that was some strong praise, it never materialized into anything meaningful on the field, as the Chargers had an atrocious defense in 1971, finishing 23rd in the league out of 26 teams in points allowed. When you've got the 7th best offense in football and you finish below 500, something definitely went wrong. After the 1971 season, with Harlan Savare now in charge as head coach, Bengtson remained in the Chargers organization and became a player evaluator. It was more of a front office role now. And yet, despite Bengtson now working for the Chargers, when Mazur left the Patriots decided to call Bengtson up and offer him the head coaching job on a strictly interim basis. That's the most mind-boggling part about all of this for me, at least. It wasn't as though the Patriots were offering him the job full-time. They were offering it to him for 5 games and 5 games only. He became the interim coach, then 1 month later returned to San Diego like nothing ever happened. Bengtson was stunned at the news, and in his introductory press conference, said that he hoped to come back to San Diego next year. Can you imagine being hired for a job and then saying, "Yeah, I hope that 1 month later, I'm back at my old job"? How absurd does that sound? Yet that's exactly what General Manager Upton Bell did, as he reiterated once again, it's just for 5 games. The money, the terms, just for 5 games. There was nothing else discussed with Bengtson. So now you had a head coach coming in for 5 games, who had no time to put his system in, had no time to become familiar with the players and their strengths and weaknesses, had no time to establish a culture or develop a relationship, and who was going to be on the first flight out the moment the season ended. How and why the Chargers didn't block this from happening, or how this was even legal in the first place, I have no clue. But regardless, this was the situation the 2 teams and Bengtson now found themselves in. How did this interim stint work out? Unsurprisingly, it was a disaster in more ways than one. On the field, the Patriots were still terrible. If you thought that Bengtson was going to turn a team around that he literally just became the head coach of, then man do I have news for you. In the 5 games that Bengtson coached, the Patriots went 1-4. The defense was still terrible, allowing 30 points per game in that stretch. The only win came against the New Orleans Saints, a team that was somehow more inept than whatever the Patriots were putting on the field every Sunday. And in one particularly embarrassing loss, the Patriots got shut out 31-0 to the Baltimore Colts, turning the ball over 6 times. Off the field, the Patriots were a giant mess as well. I already made a video on this, so I'm not going to dive too much into the specifics of it, but there was an entire controversy involving Carl Garrett, about the only good player on the Patriots offense that season. Garrett was suspended by Bengtson, and the NFL and Commissioner Rozelle found the suspension length so ridiculous that they reinstated Garrett and forced Bengtson to play him. If you want to learn more about that controversy, then click the card in the upper right corner. Bengtson did not have control of that locker room, which is not surprising since he had no idea how that locker room worked and had no time to establish his culture. True to his word, and true to the absolutely bizarre nature of the season, Bengtson returned to the Chargers after the 1972 season. But this story gets even weirder, because only 3 days after Bengtson rejoined the Chargers, he was fired by the Chargers. Head coach Harlan Savare didn't want to deal with Bengtson's way of evaluating players, and wanted to put his stamp on things, so he let Bengtson go. Bengtson was understandably disappointed about the news, but said that he had not discussed joining the Patriots on a full-time basis. So let's just recap everything here. At the start of November, Bengtson was on the Chargers. By the end of November, he was on the Patriots. By the end of December, he was back on the Chargers. And by the start of January, he was fired from the Chargers and was now unemployed. Poaching coaches and front office members from other teams happens all the time after the season. But during the season, and with the knowledge that this is strictly for a few days and then they'll return to their previous position of employment as if nothing ever happened, considering that's exactly what happened to Phil Bengtson, it might just be the craziest hiring of an interim head coach in the over 100-year history of the National Football League. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com. And be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.